So you want to know the ins and outs of managing your money. Well, lucky for you, you're just in time for another episode of Master Your Finances with certified financial planner professional Kurt Baker. Kurt and his panel of experts are here for you and will cover topics from a legal and personal standpoint. They'll discuss tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider offers continuing studies programs for adults who need flexibility. Want to add new skills to your resume? Take a continuing studies course at Rider University. Now, let's learn how we can better change our habits with Kurt Baker.
Good morning and welcome to Master Your Finances. Now that employees are in demand and people are changing jobs more frequently, how can you keep employees from leaving you? What can you as an employer do to better manage the risks of COVID before, during, and after an employee contracts the virus? Are you currently challenged with workers who are working remotely? How do you balance an in-person versus a remote work environment? These and many other questions will be answered today by labor and employment expert, attorney Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney. With more than 20 years of litigation experience in both the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Corrections, you will be learning from an expert who has seen the complex issues from both the government and small and medium-sized businesses side. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer to the show. How you doing, Jennifer? It's been a little while. Things have changed a little bit, right?
They have quite a bit.
So what are your thoughts now? Do you maybe give people a little bit of background on how you got here and what you, as far as how you got to be an employment attorney and what motivates you to represent people?
Okay, well, I started my career with the state of New Jersey while I was still in law school, actually, as a paralegal / attorney assistant. And my first assignment was not where I thought I was going to be in the Department of Environmental Protection because my undergraduate degree was in chemistry. It was instead with a unit that needed some statistical analyses to get out from under a consent decree that they had signed with the Federal Department of Labor trying to integrate the New Jersey State Police. So after I spent a summer doing that and working with the labor and employment attorneys, labor and employment law was just so much fun that I never went back to even thinking about doing environmental work. I mean, because it's all about drama.
Right.
Much of it is about people behaving badly at work.
Okay.
None of it's mine. I just get paid to watch it and try and sort it all out and help people solve it. So it's kind of like getting paid to watch reality TV.
Oh, so you're actually in reality TV to get paid for this. So now that we've, the environment has changed a lot. We went from, kind of a normal environment to people couldn't go to work. Depending on what business you're in, right? I know attorneys and advisors think we were still busy because we could work remotely, but other people, they stopped working. You had this division of some people who it really didn't affect them, the pandemic, the shutdown, not in any material way. Other people it affected them significantly. And now that things are rolling open again, one thing we're noticing is employees are in high demand, right? So how has that impacted what you do and the employers that you work with and things like that and the employees?
Well, I have an interesting mix of clients. Some were in essential businesses, so their operations didn't really change much other than requiring that they spread desks apart and add hand sanitizers and require people to wear masks. Others were just shut down for months. The hair salons, the dog groomers, non-essential retail, they were just completely shut down. So we wound up going through figuring out how to lay all their people off, make them all eligible for unemployment, how to apply for the PPP loans, how to figure out how to pay out the PPP loans because they still weren't allowed to open. It was really very interesting. And then, of course, there was a certain number of clients who were attempting to do hybrid work. So they had some people coming to the office and some people not, depending on how essential they were. And then I also have municipal clients. And so, of course, their police, EMT, fire departments, et cetera, all had to keep functioning as normal, while their other functions, the building department and grounds and maintenance and that, were all affected badly by it. I spent a lot of time writing protocols for sanitizing things and for how to bring people in through the checkpoints with the questions and the temperature and all of that, because, you know, if somebody had to get to work 15 or 20 minutes earlier to stand in line to go through this mandatory process, you had to pay them for that.
Right, exactly.
So there were all kinds of strange implications. And then, of course, once the pandemic restrictions rolled back some, then we had to figure out how to bring everybody back and what you could and could not do, and what to do about the employees who couldn't come back for one of a number of reasons. Because, of course, it took a very long time for daycare centers, summer camps, public schools to reopen. So and then they kept closing again, because as soon as one kid tested positive for COVID, they would shut everything down. So you spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to work around all this, because whatever person was the primary caretaker for either the elderly who couldn't be left alone or children who couldn't be left alone were really hard pressed to get to work every day in an office or in a physical location other than their homes, because the support structure that permitted all adults to work outside the home evaporated.
Right. So we learned a lot, I think, during the pandemic, right, where we had to really kind of pivot kind of mid-stride almost, where, you know, things were kind of normal. At one point you thought it was going to be, you know, short term, and then obviously pretty quickly thereafter we realized it was at least medium to long term. We didn't know how long exactly, and we're still not really sure exactly what's going to happen. But so what were some of the significant things that I think the employer-employee relationship, how it might have changed a little bit during the pandemic, and now that we come out of it, we're seeing this high demand for the employees and employers that have been in these kind of tough for the industry, such as hospitality as an example, comes to mind. Right? I know when they first started opening up, they had difficulty attracting people back for one reason or another. In some cases, they were just getting paid more to stay at home. In other cases, they were concerned about coming back. In other cases, they couldn't come back. They weren't feeling well. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. There was this shortage. And even today, where it seems to be, at least from my perspective, every time I go to the restaurant, it seems like there's a couple more people there. It doesn't seem like they're full staff, but it seems like it's slowly getting better. So how are some of these employers managing all these challenges that they have to maintain the business, try to keep and retain the employees, and things like that? So what have you seen as far as all that goes?
Well, it's tough, particularly when we're talking about jobs that were low-paid, customer service, customer facing, whether it was retail or folks working in restaurants or fast food places. These were people who were being put at a very high risk for COVID because they were having to interact with so many people in fairly close proximity. I mean, think about how close you are to the grocery store clerk when you check out at the grocery store. And then think about how many people that clerk checks out at the grocery store over the space of an 8-hour shift. And all of those people, she or he has to be concerned, you know, do they have COVID? Did
Right.
they just run to the grocery store anyway? Because there was a lot of that, and there still is.
Right.
So a lot of people who had been told for years by employers that, you know, working at McDonald's or at the grocery store or in retail in the mall or waiting tables well, we're not going to pay you anything because if you want real money, go get a real job. Well, guess what? During the pandemic, they all went and got a real job.
Right.
Because when FedEx and UPS were paying $20 an hour to start, and I think it's higher than that now, but a year ago it was $20 an hour to start, and the restaurants were still paying $2.63 an hour plus tips. And if you're sorting packages in a FedEx or UPS warehouse, you don't have to interact with the public who are being demanding and not understanding of, we're out of this, we're out of that. I have 4 times the number of tables I should have to be able to serve you properly. Then it really makes moving boxes in a warehouse look a lot more attractive.
Boxes don't complain, is that what you're telling me? Okay. So now that obviously that's a challenge, right? So these people that we told kind of go get another job, they got another job. Now that we really want them to come back into the public-facing realm, so to speak, whether that's retail or restaurants, hospitality. I mean, you go to the hotel, it is kind of nice to have somebody there to say hello to you when you walk in the hotel, right? So how are some of the employers meeting this challenge of saying, hey, we do want you back. The public does want to talk to other people. Let's see if we can get you back out there. And so what are some of the things they're doing, the techniques they're doing to get people back out there again, as far as employees go?
Well, you've got a number of things going on. Wages are going up. I think Apple just announced that their minimum wage for all their employees in their stores is now going to be $22 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, we're seeing the death of just-in-time scheduling, which was one of these horrific things that I think it was Starbucks that thought up. They didn't tell you what time you were working tomorrow until the end of your shift today.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So
hard to plan your life.
Right. Very hard to plan your life.
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen was that people couldn't plan their lives, and it was, if you've got more people than jobs available, you can do that. When the situation flips and you've got more jobs available than people to do them, now you have to give somebody a set schedule in order so that they can either operate their life around it, go to school around it, childcare, or a second job, because, entry level and customer facing jobs are still not paying really enough to only have one of them in New Jersey.
Absolutely. So, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances, and I'm here with Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney. Be right back.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back to Master Your Finances. I am here with Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney, and we're talking about some of the challenges that have occurred during the COVID and the lockdown, and now that we have this labor shortage, so to speak, as people are a little bit hesitant to come back to work, or they don't want to come back to work, or they found a better job, or there's many, 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 many different reasons. And Jennifer's going through those and discussing how we might be able to get back to a more balanced employment environment where when you go to the restaurant, you have enough people and you go to these different places. So what are some other things to do? I know that you said Apple increased their minimum to $22 an hour, which is good, and I'm sure that helps. And then I guess Starbucks, you mentioned, had the just-in-time scheduling, and now you can actually plan out your weekend because you'll know at least a few days in advance what you're doing, which is, I guess, pretty nice. So.
Well, I don't know that every Starbucks has done that.
Interesting.
But that is... They also, I think that particular policy is one of the things that drove the unionization drives at Starbucks. The other thing that companies can do is, because you have employees who need flexibility and who don't have childcare, instead of hiring one person and expecting them to work, 50 hours a week, you hire two, so that you've got two part-timers who can now both, between them, you can cover the hours you need to cover, and you can let everybody flex their time so that they can, the one who can't come in until they get elementary school kids on the bus can get to work at 9:30 because, the before school care isn't there yet. The one who has high school kids whose kids are on the bus at 6:15 in the morning can be the one who gets there at 8 o'clock and can be the one who leaves at 2 or 1:30 to be home when the high school kids get home. Whereas you can have the folks from, who have smaller kids or who don't have kids, or, a college student or an intern or something be the one to work the last part of the day. But you have to be flexible. Not everybody is going to be able to work full-time hours, much less the American, which across most of the world is 35 hours a week, much less the American definition of full-time hours, which comes closer to 50 hours a week. Because, the childcare industry just pretty much dried up and went away.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, and then I think schools are now done with a child tested positive. We're going to shut down the whole school for 2 weeks. But that was definitely a factor all of last year.
So based on all the adjustments we've been having to make, it sounds to me like more employers are open to the idea of part-time. And I know that people that are working don't necessarily want to work full-time now that they've spent a lot of time at home. They're like, hey, I kind of like this. Maybe it would be kind of nice to cut my hours back to 25, 30 hours a week. And I think I'm okay with that, even though it might be a reduction in income. So are you seeing kind of both sides of that a little bit, maybe a little bit of each? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, well, you're seeing certain jobs staying remote that before the pandemic were not remote. Because employers have now been forced to understand that remote is possible for a lot of jobs, you're also seeing a lot more disabled people being hired. People who could have done these jobs remotely before the pandemic, but nobody would hire them because they had to be remote, and the employers claimed remote wasn't possible. So,
that's a great plus. I mean, we talk about all the negatives. That's a huge plus, because if somebody has difficulty moving or traveling, or they can't drive, or many things they can't do, if you now connect them up to Zoom or something, they can join every meeting just like everybody else. Even if that's actually a big positive. I hadn't really thought about that one. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it has enabled a lot of disabled people to join the workforce who couldn't before and who really always wanted to be able to work.
Right.
So, that's been an advantage. It's also allowed people who needed the part-time flexibility, who couldn't join the workforce before because nobody wanted to hire part-time, to join the workforce. So, this is definitely helping as employers are starting to think more flexibly and more out of the box. They get more people. And as they're willing to say, okay, maybe my receptionist doesn't have to have a 4-year college degree. Because really, receptionists don't need 4-year college degrees. And there were a lot of jobs that we were demanding a lot of credentials for that really didn't need those credentials.
Right.
And so now employers are rethinking who can do this job. Does the receptionist have to be 18 years old or 23 years old and right out of college? Can the receptionist be right out of high school? Can the receptionist be somebody who's retired from a high-stress job and just wants to do something part-time to be out of the house? Can you have 2 or 3 receptionists who are each working part-time? There's a lot of things that people are now being more flexible about, and I think that's a good thing for everybody, because there were a lot of people who retired along the years because, I've had several of them come to me. I'm 60. I just can't haul boxes up and down a ladder 40 hours a week plus overtime every week. Okay, well, now that part-time's available, they can still haul boxes over ladders 20 hours a week, and they want to, but they didn't have that option before. So, it's definitely helping pull more people into the labor market.
Well, that's good news for people on my side of the world, where the wealth management, where we always talk about, Bill, you have to stay active. Even if you're retired, retired isn't what it used to mean. Retired used to mean, you stop and you sit and I don't know what you do, watch TV, basically vegetate. But most people don't want to do that, right? They want to stay active in some way, shape, or form, whether that's they just pivot their job to something else, or if they work contract work, or they work part-time. But it's important to keep yourself physically and mentally active, even when you're, quote, retired, not because you necessarily need the finances, but because you want to stay engaged with society under your terms, quote unquote, right? So in a way that that works for you, so to speak, right? And that helps with that aspect of it as well, right?
Yes, it does. And it helps everybody, because the more perspectives you have in a workplace, the better the chances are that you're going to solve a problem. Because if everybody who's trying to solve the problem thinks the same way, comes from the same place, has the same experiences, you're going to get a limited number of proposed solutions to any given problem. But the more different people that you have working, the more likely you are to get a solution suggested that you might not have thought of. So, as we've been discussing, trying to figure out, how to measure time while we're in here, a millennial or a Gen Z response would be, I got to set a timer on my phone, but a baby boomer's going, where's the clock on the wall? You could just put a clock on the wall and then we wouldn't have to worry about this. So that's what I mean about the different perspectives in solving problems. Having more generations and more people from different walks of life working in a place gives you a lot more different perspectives on solving a current problem.
Yeah, I agree 100%. In fact, somebody just told me the other day about they did this test on different generations, like how they do that. How do you start a car, right? And depending on your age, you would show pushing a button, or you might turn a key, or if you're really old, you might be cranking. So everybody's like, oh yeah, it's true. We're holding a phone, right? One, the younger person would hold it up like a flat face, like they're holding an iPhone. The other one hold it up like they're holding the old style receiver phone, right? So they could tell your age by just asking you some basic questions, but that's true. And now you can get each generation, and the older ones, if you go back, thousands of years, maybe it was the older people taught the younger, they worked together, right? So you blended all these expertises together, and you got the energy and the excitement of the younger people, and you have the long-term experience, and so it's fantastic when you can blend all that. I agree 100%. Some of the other things we kind of learned that, we'll start off, we're going to have a break in a few minutes, but I know the other area that we have learned a lot about and we'll just kick this off a little bit, the risks of COVID are kind of out there, or any virus for that matter. So what are some of the things that we've learned really about kind of safety things? I know one of the things that my wife and I commented on was, well, wow, isn't it kind of nice that people actually are washing their hands when they walk out of the bathroom right now? I don't know if they're still doing it, but at least for a little while, I was like, oh, finally, we got people convinced that this is a good idea. So as far as the workforce goes, how do we learn, what to do from an employment space, before something happens, maybe if there is some type of infection, no matter what it is, or how do you manage afterwards, if you have a reduction in force simply because the employees are out? I know why don't we just kick off? We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about those when we come back. Listening to Master Your Finances, I'm here with Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm here with Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney and talking about the employment workspace and some things I think we've learned through the pandemic and really managing any type of infectious disease. And during the break, we were talking briefly about how years ago, if somebody didn't feel well, the employer would say, you have to come to work or even like to school. No, you can't stay home. I don't care if you can get up and you can get out of bed, you can get in a car, you come to work. I don't care how sick you were. Well, I think at least we've changed that attitude a little bit, that bringing an infectious disease to work is probably not a great idea. If you don't feel well, take a few days off till you feel better and then come back. So what are some things from the employer-employee perspective that you've seen really kind of develop as far as a systemic like kind of thing that we do? Hey, here's what you kind of do to manage it ahead of time. Here's what we do if something is occurring that might affect this as far as the employment space. And then, okay, how do we manage it afterwards? If something is going on, how do we kind of do that long term? So what are some of the things that you've found that people have done to make adjustments?
Well, certainly there are now policies that if you're sick, don't come to work. And most companies have also put out policies that say, even if you're not sick, if you test positive for COVID, don't come to work. Mm-hmm. And the CDC guidelines change on how long you have to stay home after a positive test versus after exposure to somebody who's tested positive. But there are guidelines out there. It's not that hard to look them up. The last time I told somebody exactly what the guidelines were without having the website open, I was right at the moment I said it, but half an hour later they changed them.
Yeah, they're in flux, aren't they? They do fluctuate,
I had to
don't
call
they?
the person back. So
the page just refreshed on me.
Right. So I'm not going to predict what they are at this exact moment because I don't have a computer open in front of me.
Right.
But you definitely have to make sure that people are not coming to work when they're sick. You also are seeing employers being more understanding of employees who have long-term illnesses that make them more susceptible to diseases. A lot of employers are permitting folks who have some of these underlying symptoms or who live with people who are being treated for cancer or who have other diseases that mean they have a compromised immune system to work remotely instead of having to come into the office. And if they do have them come into the office, we're seeing a lot. I don't know if you've been through the change in office space over the decades, but we went from everybody has a hard-walled office to everybody has a 7-foot cube wall office to people have a 4-foot cube wall office to everybody sits at a long bench so that, and often there's 2 benches facing each other. So you've got, you stretch out both arms.
Does this correlate to the length of skirts, like whether we're doing well or not doing well? Like how high the wall is in the cube?
No, it came with this idea that if you took away all of the barriers, that people would interact more and that there would be more teamwork. But instead what happens is that everybody brings their headphones to work, listens to their own music, and ignores everybody as hard as they can in order to make some attempt at concentrating in the middle of chaos.
Well, yeah, the thing I've definitely noticed, even just in my small world of people that I work with, it's like, okay, some people are okay with lots of noise. Other people, pin better be able to drop, or you're not gonna be able to think. And I'm one of those people where if I need to think, I really need it quiet. I can't work like in a subway station and do analytical work. I just can't. I'm just not going to work for me. But I think we're all built differently too. So I don't think it's like a one size fits all. And hopefully something we're learning is that we can customize the workspace to some degree to meet the needs of the individual employee or employer so that it kind of works better for everybody. Hopefully that's something we're starting to learn.
Well, as more people are being able to work remotely, we're also seeing that they're spacing out the people who are left in the office more. Now, whether you're talking about not passing on the common cold, not passing on COVID, not passing on whatever the next disease of the month will be, having people 6 foot apart instead of having, 2 feet between their shoulders is definitely cuts down on the amount of germs that they can pass along. So we're seeing employers spacing people out better, both to prevent and to deal with, any kind of, what happens if. And of course, the what happens if, everybody now has to have a protocol for what happens if somebody came to work yesterday and calls you this morning and says, I just tested positive for COVID. So you have to have a protocol to alert all the employees who were in the office or your facility that day who could have come in contact with that person, that somebody was in yesterday who has since tested positive for COVID, that they may be affected, that they should go get tested. Now, some people will, some people won't, but you have to make sure that you let everybody know that they were exposed.
Right.
Because you don't know which employees have a pregnant spouse at home.
Right.
Or stop and take care of their grandmother who's, being treated for cancer on the way home from work every day, who has a decreased immune system because of the chemo. And you don't want to be responsible for somebody getting sick who didn't have to get sick. So there's a whole lot of thought around how to let people know, whether they've been exposed, whether it was an employee or a customer who was kind enough to let you know that they tested positive and they were in yesterday. So you're seeing that. But we're all kind of learning how to live with this.
Right.
And thankfully, the newer variants don't seem to be quite as severe as the earlier variants. And as people have been exposed to earlier variants, if you got the original one, you still have some residual immunity to the new ones. Same thing if you got the immunizations against the original, you have some immunity. So that makes people less sick, or at least people with well-developed immune systems less sick when they get it. But it is fairly brutal.
Right.
In the last 2 weeks, I have had one deposition had to go remote because one of the attorneys tested positive for COVID. And I had another where we had to do a discovery extension because the attorney had been sick in bed with COVID for a week and wasn't going to get their discovery out.
Right.
Now, in case you're thinking that these were, 70-year-olds and that I'm dealing with, no, both of these people were at least 15 years younger than I am. So.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, you just never know, right? So,
Yeah.
You have to know your profile and see if you're at higher risk, of course, and just know your own, just like with anything, right? You manage it appropriately because it can be very serious for people. And you're right. The good news is, I guess my understanding is viruses tend to get less lethal and more contagious as they go on because they want to survive too, right? If the more hosts they kill, they're not going to continue. So if they kill hosts, they have to become more contagious, so to speak, to find a new host because they have to be able to travel further, but they don't want to kill that one. So it's weird how they even understand, even as a virus, that to sustain, it kind of modifies. Nature's kind of interesting to me. When I learned this, that it was kind of, I guess that makes sense. If you're a virus, not that a virus thinks, but it's kind of odd to me.
Yeah.
But
they don't think, but certainly the ones that are more contagious but less lethal get past.
They'll survive,
more,
right? They survive.
So therefore,
correct.
They stay in the population.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply they think. But those are the survivors, the one that got further but didn't kill the host, right? So it kind of makes a lot of sense, and fortunately for most of us that's enough. But as you point out, it's still a very dangerous thing. You have to be careful of. So now that we kind of know what to do, like beforehand, we take the precautions, set the people apart. You notify people. So after there's something that happens, like there's a shutdown, I guess we go more remote, or we learn how to modify the work place, because some places can modify, some places can't really. So what kind of things have we learned, kind of in the after effect if you have a large contagious event, so to speak, infectious event?
Well, I think we have learned, one, how much can be done remotely. Two, that we can change the way that we do certain functions so that we have fewer people present doing them at the same time. So I have a neighbor who works in building maintenance, maintaining HVAC systems up in the city for huge corporations. And they split them between day shift and night shift so that there would only be half as many people in the plant at a time, but all the work would get done because half of them would be there in the day and half of them would be there at night. So we've realized that we can do things like that to even for people who must be in the workplace in order to get their work done. Cool. So we've learned how flexible we can be.
Well, that's great. We've kind of pushed the envelope. We'll take another, which is amazing. I mean, we definitely learn when we have adversity comes in, you tend to learn things from that, right? I think we have definitely learned a lot. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm here with Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney. We will be right back.
This is Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Learn about tax efficiency, liability, owning, managing, and saving your money, and more from Kurt and his experienced panel of guests. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider University offers flexible education for adult learners. For more information, it's rider.edu/nextstep.
Welcome back again. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am here with Jennifer Meyer-Mahoney, and she's been giving us a lot of great information about the employer-employee relationship and how we've actually done some updates as far as the work environment goes. And so what is currently, I know we've had a lot going on for the last 2 years, so what are kind of some of the current issues that are going on between employer and employee that people should be aware of, whether you're an employer or employee right now?
All right, so what the two big kinds of issues I'm seeing right now, the first revolves around people moving between jobs. And, before the pandemic, now the year before the pandemic, we were already having trouble finding enough employees to fill entry-level jobs. But if you go back 5 years before, it was an employer's market. And so a lot of employers were having employees sign what lawyers call restrictive covenant agreements, what lay people call non-competes. And these things say that if you leave your current job or they fire you, you can't go work for a direct competitor for X amount of time or a related business within a certain radius. You can't take their confidential information, and you can't solicit their customers or vendors' employees. Now, during the pandemic, a lot of companies shut down, employees got laid off, some of them got brought back, some of them didn't. A lot of people started jumping between jobs, and now people are definitely jumping between jobs because for some reason folks don't want to train anybody, but they're willing to bid up the price on folks who are already trained. So there's a lot of competition for employees. And what is happening is the prior employers, rather than meeting an offer or preemptively paying their people more money or making better working conditions, are instead choosing to go into court to sue former employees and their new employers on the non-compete agreements. Now, these things are rarely upheld.
Okay.
Now, the no using confidential information and the don't solicit your prior employer's customers is routinely upheld.
Yeah, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, the courts will uphold those restrictions. What they are very loath to uphold are restrictions on somebody moving to a different employer.
Yeah, the old saying is you can't stop somebody from totally working, especially with specialized talent, so to speak. I mean, it's like, okay, you can restrict and protect your business, so to speak, but the other side of it is you can't stop somebody from working.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's the way I read that whole
Yeah.
thing. It's like, yeah, you want to be fair to both. Like, especially with the pandemic where they literally shut down and here's somebody that's not working. It's like, hey, I got to find a job. And maybe the previous employer hadn't even started up yet, right? Wasn't ready yet for this person, theoretically.
Yeah. So what happens here is that employers try and use these provisions to prevent people from leaving. And the courts don't like that. And so you've got employers who will go out and who will sue the first guy who left to try and send a message to everybody else who's still working there that you better not do the same thing. And I have 4 or 5 non-compete cases going right now, all at the same time.
Wow.
Now, normally, I would see 4 or 5 over the space of a year, not 4 or 5 of them simultaneously.
Wow.
So there are employers who are really using these non-competes as a shield, not just as a sword, not just as a shield. And I think it's going to result in some bad case law because I think courts are going to see that and are going to start issuing decisions that are even more anti-non-compete than what's on the books. And there are some legitimate uses for non-competes. But, what I'm seeing people try and enforce is not the one that the hair salon has that says that if you leave, you can't start working at another salon within a 2-mile radius of this salon.
Right.
Well, now every court out there is going to uphold that because that's
Reasonable.
entirely reasonable.
Sure. Absolutely.
For a year. Can't work within 2 miles for a year. That's entirely reasonable.
Right.
But, you can't work for a competitor, a client, or a vendor for 2 years with broad definitions of all of those things, including prospective clients. And courts aren't going to uphold that.
Okay.
It's just not going to happen. So we're going to get some case law that does not go in employers' favor as a result of some employers trying too hard to hold on to employees the wrong way.
And I think that does 2 things. You have to be careful of. Obviously, you want to protect your business, but also, don't you want to create kind of a reputation for being reasonable? Because how are you going to attract new employees, right? If everybody else gets word, and I know of a local a place that basically had some skilled people in there, and they were so hard that nobody really wants to go there and work. And it's the kind of place where they would. It's similar to a hairdresser type thing, right? Where they're fitness instructors, things like that. And they held on them a little bit longer because of these terms. But now they're having trouble attracting people because they're like, I'm afraid of working there because I don't want to sign that thing.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be really cautious about that. If it's reasonable to both parties, most people say, okay, that's fine. If it's not reasonable, it can hurt the business too long term. They just have to be careful about what they're having their employees agree to.
Particularly when employees have a lot of choices of where to go work.
Right.
Because employers do get reputations.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
So what was the other thing that was up there?
The other thing that I am seeing a lot of is the Department of Labor is actively looking for misclassified employees. They are doing a lot of unemployment audits right now because the unemployment funds took a huge hit during COVID.
Oh my goodness.
And the fund was completely drawn down. All the federal government money was completely drawn down. And so in order to refill these coffers, they are going looking for misclassified independent contractors and for people who were not paid properly. Because, of course, what you pay for your premium for unemployment is based in large part on what your employees are paid. Mm-hmm. So if you're not making people employees, you're trying to make them independent contractors, or you are a service type business that sends people out to make house calls and you're not paying them for travel time from the point from the shop to the first call or between calls or from the last call back to the shop, then you're shorting people hours of pay every day,
Right.
which is dropping your unemployment premium by that a percentage of that. And so DOL is looking for those situations too. And that, repair people or contractors, technical people who have to drive from a starting location to a customer site and then from the customer site either to another customer site or back to the shop, who are not paid for that commute time, is one of the things that both the federal and the state departments of labor are focusing on right now. So you got to make sure that you've got your pay practices right. And if you have any questions as to whether somebody should be an independent contractor or an employee, they're an employee.
Yeah.
Because in New Jersey, it's really tough to make somebody an independent contractor. And I see people who do it all the time. Oh, yeah, well, the receptionist is an independent contractor. No, she's not. Now, if you are using a virtual office,
Yeah, that's a little different. Yeah.
then the receptionist who assists you is paid as an employee by that company.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
Right.
They're not your employee at all. You're not paying them directly. You're paying the company, which is paying them. That's fine. But if you're paying the person, they're sitting in your office and you're telling them what to do, when to get there,
Right.
how to do it, providing the tools and equipment for them to do it, they're an employee.
Yeah, I just remember when I first moved to New Jersey, it was pretty restrictive because it was like just exactly what you said. It's like if you're telling them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, basically they're an employee. The other stuff is like, oh, you just pay them as an employee because you're not going to be happy when they come and audit you because you are going to end up paying right in a big, because then you pay everything. So then because that happened in the mortgage industry years and years and years ago, where everybody tried to hire people as independent contractors, and they came just swiped through and said nope.
Yep.
And it was like, and anybody who tried, that was it. No, definitely not.
And then you pay the employer's share of
Yeah.
all of the taxes, the employee's share of all the taxes. You pay all the back unemployment pay that you didn't pay, and you're going to pay administrative fees and fines.
Right.
And you're going to have to pay either your accountant or your attorney or both to get you out of that mess with as little damage as possible, which is going to cost you a whole lot more than just paying people as employees in the first place.
That is absolutely correct. So I agree with Jennifer on this 100%. If you think you have an independent contractor, chances are they're not. You probably want to double check it, because in New Jersey is a high probability you really have an employee. So just check with somebody. And Jennifer, I appreciate everything you told us today. I mean, out there we've learned a lot. And you can get some more resources from the New Jersey DOL by going to www.nj.gov/labor. And there's a couple of drop downs in there. You can learn about employees, as well as things to do about COVID and so forth. If you have any information that you have questions about, you can reach Jennifer by going to njhrlawyer.com. You can listen to all the podcasts, and please subscribe by going to masteryourfinances.us. And I hope you enjoyed learning more about how to keep employees and how to improve the work environment to keep more employees working longer, and what to do as far as non-compete clauses in New Jersey, and to have better employer-employee relationships, and what the DOL is looking for now. You got it all here. Master Your Finances. Have a great day.
That was this week's episode of Master Your Finances with Kurt Baker, Certified Financial Planner Professional. Tune in every Sunday at 9 a.m. to expand your knowledge in building and managing your wealth. Missed an episode? No worries. You can subscribe to a free weekly episode of Master Your Finances to listen to on your favorite podcasting platform. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever. Master Your Finances is underwritten in part by Certified Wealth Management and Investment and Rider University. Rider offers continuing studies programs for adults who need flexibility. Want to add new skills to your resume? Take a continuing studies course at Rider University.